right, so we're just started with the community governance meeting of this week. Except me, there are 4 other people here: Tivo, Peter, Kenrick, and Peter. A number of usual faces are otherwise engaged, so cannot make it. So it's a small but very nice group. We were just, before putting the record button, we were just starting to discuss our feedback on the deep funding governance experiment that we concluded last week. And Kenrick was just explaining about degrading reputations. Kenrick.
Well, what I was going to emphasize is that in any kind of system, negative feedback is important. Positive feedback loops tend to be unstable. So you have to think about what a negative feedback loop would be on your reputation. And in particular, I think a kind of neutral one over time where your reputation decays over time is important for 2 reasons. One, you want to base the reputation on what people have contributed recently. And 2, you want new people in the community to be able to have a chance to build up a meaningful reputation rather than always being behind people who joined the community at an earlier date. So, for instance, one place I saw that within the cryptocurrency community is the blockchain IOTA, where they're using a reputation system in their consensus process on the blockchain itself. And they had built into that a decay process on that reputation.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think time is of essence in reputation, and on one hand, it will strengthen somebody's reliability and believability, how do you say it, if he has been a long-term contributor. But on the other hand, we have to ensure that it doesn't block new people from surfacing that might be at this moment in time even more valuable contributors than somebody who has been contributing for a long time but is not doing that much anymore. So yeah, totally agree there. So that would be an interesting ingredient. By the way, we also have negative feedback there. You can give negative comments to people, which was actually almost not done in this round, with 3 exceptions or something. But I expect over time that might also become a stronger measure, that especially if at some point it's obvious that people try to game the system, for instance, or are not really engaged or whatever, then also giving people negative comments might help. And the tricky thing here is that all these things might also be used for the wrong reasons. So if I would try to game the system, I could create 100 comments myself, or script it or whatever, and then make a script that I will give negative comments to all the existing messages. Yeah, and that will probably be some kind of force and counter force that we have to work with.
At the early days in Gimba Labs, when tokenomics discussions were started, I think this was also the same thing, that the reputation should decay to incentivize the active people to stay active also. And
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. It's also a motivation to keep working. Yeah. Okay. You know, the good thing, what I like maybe most about the methodology of a reputation system is that you have a lot of data, and you're not forced or limited to use that data as is, but you're able at any point in time to tweak what data is more or less important based on new experiences. And of course, you can build processes around that as well to avoid centralized use in an undesired way. And that will come if we grow to maturity. But at least with all the data, you have still, if you learn, if you have new insights, if new things happen, like somebody wanting to game the system, for instance, you always have certain means to counter that, I would say. So that is what I really like about more sophisticated reputation systems. All right. Tivo, did you have any feedback on the results of the? I saw you unmute for a moment on the governance experiment.
Technically, no, not very particular feedback. Because Henrik is here and we talked about and on the new deep fund round, what could we do differently? I just was wondering if it's a place to ask a new voting model, and then since Henrik here, perhaps he can share light, is that even feasible, which is related to the dynamic voting results. The more requests you add, the more votes you need, and how do you create the scalar of that? I can show it, but if it's not related to current topic or agendas, then I will.
Well, feel free to show if you think that clarifies things. So we did make a kind of algorithm that accounts for rating, that accounts for the number of people. It accounts for the average rate, I should say, of a proposal on the portal. It accounts for the number of people that have actually rated I won't use the word voting, but rated the proposal. And it accounts for the total number of proposals being submitted. So I did manage to put that in some kind of form without making it overly complex. And I hope I succeeded in that. But
perhaps it kind of already establishes, but these are basically the main parameters. Maybe I can zoom in. I think it's somewhat similar, but I was looking more at the voting power because I took an example to try it out on the Catalyst proposals, where the proposal amount is like, there was 500 proposals, and like the sum of voting was like, I don't know, 5 billion, actually even more, maybe 500 billion. And then I had an idea that perhaps 20% of staging is enough, which means that you divide your entire proportion into like 5 parts. You take the 20% of that full amount, and then you divide it with all the proposals until the proposals ran out. And actually the 6 stages were actually the right amount. And then also I staged the total funds. So instead of using the requested funds, I used the total funds. So it had 2 different ideas. I didn't automate it all that process so that if you change a number here, it actually doesn't change any results. That was another 8 hours of work, and I thought I just tried to do it in an ugly way.
So at first I thought this is very similar to what I was doing, but I'm not quite sure what you mean with the stages.
Yeah, so I guess when I share it, it's easier. So this page now shows all the proposals in that integration. So the first approach was to filter them by the stage. So it basically, when 20% of the stage was 150 million or something, I think I said it correctly. 1.6 billion, for example. And then it starts, and everything else remains the same for now. Like the idea was that.
It's still not clear what your definition of a stage is.
So basically, if 1.6 billion is a stage, And then, okay, so stage was the 20% of, so this number, total funds of the budget times the percent. So the percent gives like how many times you want to slice the proposals into different stages. And the stage is like the
maybe stage isn't the right word then. In other words, it's sort of like a quantile of and you're just ranking it by the size of the proposals, or you're ranking it by the order that they were voted in?
The order they're voted in is the sequence, but then yes, you group it. Yeah, I guess the stage is not right. So group size or something. And yeah, okay, and then basically, yeah, then the group sizes for the first example, it would be these 3 proposals get to be the first group. Okay, so it's also actually still, yeah, it's put into the sequence of starting with the highest amount, and then because in one group you fill 1.6 billion, so first 3 proposals are there. So then the group starts again. The next group of the highest amounted proposals are now these 3, and so on. And you kind of reach to the end where most of the proposals just fill $1,000. And then I still apply the same logic of what the Catalyst has, that the most yes votes are like total, like yes votes minus no votes, and the positive result gets to the top. And I think that was the goal, yeah. And then you apply the same way, but then another percent was the how many percent. So the multipliers also I put the 20%, like how much more votes you need to have over other stages. So if you are in the stage 1 group, you're the highest cost and your request like 1 million, and another proposal, and both get 10 million votes, positive votes, let's say. Then for if you are in the last stage, so it's just times 6, like the lowest stage, or wrong word, the lowest group size proposal will get then 20% times 6 more. It has to have 20% times 6 less votes than the highest one.
Okay, if you could pause a moment, Tivo. I don't fully understand what you're trying to say here, but let me see if I can capture part of the essence of it. You're ranking the proposals by how much they're requesting the funds.
Yeah.
And you're splitting that ranking by how much they're requesting into 5 different groups. And then if I think what I'm saying is that if a proposal, or if a proposer asks for more money, they also have to get more support from the community to be allocated that funds. Is that part of what you're trying to get across?
Yeah.
But maybe we could back up. I'm interested to hear what John has to say about the process that was actually used in this round, and in particular how you use this reputation system and how you use the quadratic voting to do the selection.
Yeah, so one other thing, one other comment here at Tivo. First of all, I think it's interesting because previously we had 2 pools, one for 150K plus proposals and one for max 40K proposals, or 150K minus, I should say, and one for 50K minus proposals. Now we have everything in one pool. So this is an interesting point, that whether we want to have a similar principle, that higher valued proposals also would require more support. So that's an interesting thought. One difference between Catalyst and Deep Funding is that we have grade voting. So that complicates things a little bit more.
What kind of voting do you have?
Grade voting, and also the reputation points on the rating on the portal is actually also graded. So it's from -100 till 100 instead of for or against.
And technically, it doesn't matter in a sense because that is more of an overlay which filters proposals into different groups based on the configuration. I just used an example to split it into 6, but the results I didn't really get to was that actually 20% is not good enough. When I will probably have to split it into way more smaller group sizes to actually have an impact on the smaller proposals to make it up. And you can multiply the rankings of all the results, and like you can always have all the reputation already applied, and then you apply the multiplier of the group size.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that it's going to be a little bit confusing for people to understand what the system is. I think you're wanting to. It's good to have nuance in how you make the decisions and do a nice design, but simplicity has to be part of the design too. That needs to be a requirement. Now, you saying that for Deep Fund 2, when you say you only have one group, you're referring to your plans for this Deep Fund 2, or you're referring to the election you just did?
Sorry. If I say that I have, if I have what funds?
Well, you said that you're only going to have one group. In other words,
I'm referring to the next round of Deep Funding. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, what drove the decision to have one group rather than two groups or two proposal size?
Well, I think the first driver was that it turns out that we had one group of max 40K, and coincidentally, 90% of the proposals were exactly 40K. So I'd like to challenge the proposers to really think about what they actually need and come up with a proper amount. That's one thing. Another thing is that as it stands right now, we already have 5 pools. So I'm also, we haven't decided yet on the to be awarded amount, but I want to avoid that pools will become too diluted. And the third one would actually simply be experimentation. So the reason why we had 2 pools in the first round is that we wanted to stimulate proposers with more substantial solutions. And what we learned, which is different today, but what at the beginning of this year, I think was still the case, that in Catalyst, at least what I was informed, is that the community tends to award mostly the smaller proposals. And we wanted also to have some kind of motivation for our community to say, well, we think it's good to also award a few higher proposals.
Yeah, I do actually think that one of the things I've recommended in the Catalyst process is that for each challenge, the challenge team be allowed to set a minimum and maximum budget for the proposers. They have a maximum budget for the whole challenge, but it seems to me that problems arise in people either proposing too much or proposing not enough. If you propose too much, you may have an outstanding proposal that people really want to support, but if you get ranked first, then you can possibly be the only project that gets awarded, and that maybe doesn't meet the intent of the challenge. And on the other hand, you may have a terrific idea and be willing to do it at a small cost, but at some point, you know, there's literally projects that have requested between $1 to $100, and then what are you funding? The overhead to manage that project is going to cost more than what you're providing as funding. So it, you know, so I think it's diversity in what people can propose is good, but there just need to be some limits on it. So it's been my recommendation that you have kind of a minimum and maximum on what can be proposed.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Actually, one of the things that I thought about doing for today, I'm not sure if we should, because we are in quite a short, quite a few people here, small number of people, is going over the different pools that we have outlined and see if we can come up with some specific conditions. And one of the pools, Kenrick, would be for teams that would have existing services and that they would then onboard on our platform and maybe tweak a little bit if needed. And that would be a totally different situation than somebody who would make something from scratch. So it would also apply for a different amount. And that it actually, I can imagine that for $1,000 you could already do something there. Peter and me had some discussions about the most accurate amount there. Whereas if you would need to develop a whole new service and maybe a solution to come with it, etc., that's a whole different ballgame. So, yeah, I hear what you say. One answer to that would be, wouldn't the community choice be sufficient enough to regulate that, or would we need to install hard rules to accomplish that? So I agree, in most cases it would not be beneficial to have one project eating up all of the funding. On the other hand, if it would be sufficiently brilliant, maybe it should. And at the same time, yeah, if somebody asks too little, you can ask yourself if he really contemplate the solution and if you will be able to accomplish anything with that amount. But then again, there's also the community who can make that decision.
Can I ask a question, Jan, about this topic?
Yeah.
Because I saw that in the agenda that this was mentioned to onboard existing services, and I think Peter Elfrink also mentioned it in a Discord call a couple of weeks ago. This idea of onboarding existing services.
Yeah,
I think it's a great idea, but I think the quality of such a contribution would be in the testing. So it would be, you know, onboarding technically is one thing, but then you have to test it really well whether it works. So then you just mentioned an amount of, you know, maximum amount of $1,000. I think that would be very low if you want to test elaborately.
Yeah. I actually agree. $1,000 is not much. Also, if you want to divide it between different people, so I can imagine a community member that doesn't have development background will help in exploring and finding and reaching out and motivating developers to come to the platform. There's always some work related to onboarding the service onto the platform. That might be another person. And then, of course, there's the developer who we also want to motivate, even if he wouldn't, in the rare situation, they wouldn't have to do anything because the service is completely ready. We could still use that as a little motivation to actually get activated. As you say, there is testing. That is a very good point. So this we could add to the form that we will use to submit such a proposal, to come up with a few testing scenarios. So what kind of tests would this service need to fulfill in order to accomplish its goals? And we can make that part of the conditions before the awards are being disbursed. So that's a very, very valuable one. There's another scenario where you do have an AI service, but it's not API based. It's not ready to be called by an API. And yeah, that could even amount to total refactoring of the initial service, which would be a very substantial effort, potentially.
Yeah, I agree totally. So maybe that would also be made more clear in the the conditions for a proposal, that this technical point of having an API already or not, and how this would be integrated.
Yeah, exactly. So these are the kind of things we thought about. So we thought at first, when we came up with the idea, we thought maybe we can have a fixed amount for existing services. But because of the reasons just outlined, we thought, well, every situation is different. And yeah, especially for the first round, let's just see what people come up with, and what the average, the mean is. And yeah, and take it from there on, and use those learnings in the next round after this one. So it will be a learning round for existing services, and maybe we'll encounter things that we didn't think of before. But yeah, I hope it will activate community members to help us find appropriate service and service developers, and ideally it would turn into a very quick turnaround in actually having these services onboarded. And we will also, the idea was to have these services to do the disbursement only after the service is actually present on the platform. And while I'm saying that, I'm also starting to doubt, because if you would need 200 hours of refactoring a service, then I'm not sure if we can still say that you will only get disbursed at the end when the service is actually landed on the platform. But then you can also argue that this is a kind of a gray area between what is an existing service and what is a new service.
Yeah. You might be able to think of it in 3 phases. A first phase would be like a prototyping proof, where you wouldn't necessarily expect a team to put the service on the platform. But what you would do is to have them prove that the service is going to be of value. That would be phase 1. And then the phase 2 would be a larger amount of money to actually develop the service into a product that can be hosted on the server and actually made available to the public through the marketplace. Yeah. And then phase 3 would be some kind of commercial partnership to actually drive sales and drive customer interest, and actually boost it to the point that it's a profitable service.
And phase 1. So phase 3 would already, I think a service provider would already be motivated to do that by himself or herself, because that already would bring you revenues as a service provider if you do that. So do we need to put an extra award to that, would be the first question.
Not necessarily. So that's an interesting point. The model I was thinking about is the Small Business Innovative Research funding in the United States. So as you're describing, phase one is provided by, grants from the federal government that are smaller, and then phase two is also funding from the U.S. government that is larger, maybe 2 to 3 year project for them. But then phase three is the way it's designed, as I understand it, is actually maybe matching funds, but you have to have some kind of sponsor, either another government agency or a commercial provider that's going to sponsor the project. But then maybe there's some matching funds.
Yeah, Henry, I don't know.
The third phase can be driven by more commercial finance.
Kenrick, I don't know, because I would personally be very interested in services from Africa or Asia coming on aboard, and then I don't know whether they have government support or not.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just giving a model of 3 phases. The support would come from SingularityNET, but the question is, on phase 3, if you still need to do more investing in order for the sales to be profitable, that funding maybe is something that the company would be expected to get on their own, but perhaps it would be worthwhile for SingularityNET to match. I'm not sure, but anyways, phase 3, I agree with you that phase 3 would be something that the company would be incentivized to find financing for.
Yeah. Of course, we applaud any developer and proposer, whatever, that will also be able to attract other kinds of incomes and grants, etc. That's only beneficial for the whole ecosystem. So that's only good. And if we can have some role in that, we will usually do that. If that would need to be a financial role, I'm not 100% sure. Now, going back to phase 1, I was thinking, if you're talking about existing services, then some proof of that service should already be available when you submit your proposal.
Well, I guess I was thinking of phase 1 as something like your smaller grants that you gave out in Deep Fund 1. And there, it's not necessarily enough funding to actually implement a service on the site. It could be, but maybe that's not the priority. The priority, I guess, is to invest in potential projects, test them. And I guess I say this because I can see a problem with rushing services onto the website and then them not being successful, right? So maybe before you rush a project to be hosted, you want to get some proof that it's going to be of value. And then only once you've proven that it's of value, do you put more effort into making it into a product that would actually be able to generate sales.
And how would you go about proving that value?
Charles Hoskinson uses the phrase evidence-based business, for instance, right? So you're kind of applying the principles of science to business problems. So for instance, you come up with some kind of hypotheses about the potential business value. And then you, in that phase 1, you carry out a set of development experiments to test that hypothesis.
But if we're talking about a service that is already existing, how would you evaluate that? Wouldn't it? So I can still imagine two things. Either the service is already hosted somewhere on a private server or whatever, but it works, and then you can show it already in the proposal. Or it is available as source code or whatever, but not active, not being able to be tested. And then you would need to put it on some kind of server. And yeah, I can imagine there are two steps, that before putting it on our platform, you first put it on a server without our platform in the middle. That could be an intermediate step, maybe.
Maybe
can I make another point?
Go ahead.
Yeah, in the first round, there was some discussion about how the hosting costs would be, paid or whatever, funded.
Yeah.
And maybe we can also improve that for round 2.
How would you like to improve that?
Well, at least make clear that what is in and what is out of what SingularityNET funds.
Yeah. So the answer to that in round 1 was the background of this thing is that in the future we want to. So, well, the real ground reason is that we want to make sure that it's not that services are not only developed, but are also actually onboarded and used on our platform. So we try to incentivize that in our phase 2 proposal by saying that 25% of the costs would be related to API calls to other services, thinking about our AI DSL architecture, which would enable services to collaborate and work together. AI DSL is in the works, but not fully operational yet. It will take a while still. But we still wanted to have that 25% as an incentive, and we were also bound to what we put forward on the proposal. So we decided to incentivize people to host the service, to actually use the service on our platform by enabling them to use the 25% for hosting. And the way that we do that in practice right now, it's not only we pay out, we are a little bit liberal there. We not only pay out that 25% for hosting services of finalized, finished services, but you're also allowed to use it during the R&D process. So if you already have server costs during development, we tend to be covering that as well by that 25%. Does that answer your question, or do you still have things that could be improved or clarified? Yeah, I know that it's a little bit hard thing to explain, but
yeah, no, I think that's a very good thing, and also you could ask, parties like Votrek, what are their experience with the first round, and how we could make it more clear for the second round.
Yeah, we could do that, Kenrick. Ask and the others what so your input is also appreciated here.
Well,
yes,
my biggest, I can give short feedback, and Jan knows about this, is that I think given the importance of actually hosting the algorithms on the website, there needs to be a commitment or some kind of partnership with the SingularityNET team to help make that happen. And so that's on our own projects kind of the biggest weakness right now that we are working with Jan and the SNet team to resolve, so that we can actually complete the project. But a plan, I guess maybe that gets to the point too of, I think it's good to have a smaller pool where there isn't a commitment to host the algorithms yet. You just want to flesh out the ideas, and that can be more projects. But then you go to phase 2 where there's a larger amount of money to do the actual development, but there's also a commitment of a partnership with the SNet technical staff to get it hosted.
Yeah. All right. Let's go back to the 5. We have 5 pools, and we're already halfway the meeting, but we also already progressing on the actual agenda here. First of all, Peter, let me say that we also have put out until now 2 surveys across the awarded teams, in which we're asking about their progress. But the first survey, we also asked about their experience and what was good and bad, the good, bad, and the ugly. And to be honest, the feedback was extremely good. I didn't expect bad feedback, but it was really good. And I think the thing that was best liked among the teams maybe is that we try to be really supportive. Instead of having a policing attitude, these are the rules, you have to do this, otherwise you can't do, and prove, etc. We do that too, to a certain extent. But the main thing is that we try to collaborate with the teams and try to support them. And even if the sport may not always be up to the standards that you would like, Kenrick, at least that is our attitude. And of course, at SingularityNET, we are usually ambitious and we have limited teams. So yeah, we always have to make choices in what people can and cannot do. So our approach here is to try and make our documentation online as good as possible. We had a couple of meetings where actually there is interaction with our developers to ask questions and to get feedback. But what we would only do if really necessary is to say to the developing teams, okay, give it to us and we will do everything for you. It would be better to hear where you have a bottleneck and then try to explain that so that we can also use that knowledge and improve our documentation for the next team who comes around.
Yeah, exactly. Can maybe one idea is, can a video be made by the development team so that they, on a video, they show how you onboard, how you, connect to the web service, how the API is called. So then a video is maybe a little bit more clear than a manual.
Yeah. Yeah, did you actually go to the publisher portal? Because there was another discussion recently also on Discord, where the developer was mainly looking at the developer portal, which makes sense. Whereas that's a little bit more wide spun and more ideation, etc. Whereas the publisher portal is more targeted to getting your service online on a step-by-step base. So that would be my first step. And I think there was a community member a while back, like a year ago or something. Not sure if Peter is still available and knows this, that actually did make some kind of video.
I think that was Mac for a Day.
I don't know. I don't remember who it was, but actually with some, the way I remember it was actually with some coding examples, but also going through it really quickly and really fast. So probably that can be improved upon. But I'll forward your suggestion. And yeah, actually thinking about this, going back to the agenda of these 5 pools. So we talked about the regular pool having no maximum and minimum anymore, but the requirement there would be very clear. Either part of the proposal should be either development of a service and onboarding it on the platform, or utilizing a service on the platform. Very clear cut. That would be one simple but clear condition. Then we have the existing services. Now, we just were brainstorming a little bit about that and how we will do the disbursements, how these things will turn out, if they're really that simple, if we hope they will be, or if it will be multi-phased. I tend to not restrict that too much at this stage, but because it's a first experiment, leave it also the milestones and the disbursements, maybe to the proposers, see how that will turn out, and then in the next round we can guide that perhaps a little bit better. Then, and that was where I'm going to, we also have a marketing pool. Now, last time in round one, we said that there would be different kinds of proposals that would be eligible for funding, as long as, and the main requirement was you have to support the platform in one way or another. But even though it wasn't a real problem at that stage, I could foresee situations where it's a little bit ambiguous. Is this a marketing proposal, or is this actually a development proposal? Let's call it that. Where if I would say to a team, listen, but you're not creating a service, and then they would probably suddenly flip and say, oh, but it's a marketing proposal. So I want to make it very clear in which box each proposal should land, and also assign a proper amount to it. So the two main pools would be existing services and new services, or utilization of services. And then there are three smaller secondary pools. And one of them would be a marketing pool, the other would be ideation. So also here, Kenrick, there would already be an option to start build on your solution without delivering an actual service already. So that is somehow already accounted for. We have the part which is for tooling, for deep funding itself, or maybe for the platform. Here, what I see is, for instance, a proposal around a reputation system or dashboard that we could use within deep funding, but maybe in the future also for other platforms and teams and initiatives. And marketing could be used to create a proposal that will create outreach. So there's a little bit of overlap here with the existing services, because that might also stimulate outreach. But, and I'm going finally to my point here, creating a video-based tutorial might be a perfect example for a marketing proposal. So I would love it if a community member, or maybe a member that is already planning to put an existing service on the portal, would use that to create an instructive video. Or it doesn't have to be a video, it might also be in a different format that would be appropriate. And then we could evaluate that as a marketing proposal.
Regarding the
I
marketing,
should say is that I'm understanding better now as I look through the 5 different categories you're planning. When you said you were taking the regular one and moving it from 2 categories to 1, I was sort of thinking of that as the whole thing, but you actually have several different categories that fulfill different needs of the mission.
Yeah, 5 at the moment.
And a couple of those fit into what I was describing as, you know, the phase 1 is sort of the ideation category. The regular one is like a phase 2 in my mind. And then the services one, where you already have an existing service, that's kind of like a phase 3 in a sense.
It's nice how that how you make that all fit together. Yeah. you could see it. You could.
Yeah. So now I follow better. You know.
So we're perfectly aligned, Kenrick.
Yes, that's right.
All right. Yeah. So
regarding the marketing pool itself, just for clarification, because we also have the ambassador system running, is marketing also related anyhow, like internal way, like what we do here internally, and these people who are coming to propose and helping them to coordinate and understand this, or it's a very well focused on marketing the services and platform itself?
I would say that any pool, including marketing, would need to have the end goal of helping to grow our platform. And our platform is two-sided. It's publishers and consumers of AI service. So internal, if you would say, I will create a tutorial that would help other ambassadors to make better texts or whatever video presentations, then I would say that's a little bit weak in respect of the goal of deep funding. But if you would use a marketing pool to create an activity that might have overlap with the ambassador program, so for instance, create documentation which is clear and user-friendly to onboard a new service, I can imagine that could be a task that we would put out as part of the ambassador program. But in this case, I think that would also be perfectly suited for the marketing. I think for the marketing pool, most important would be that the deliverable is somehow quantifiable. So what are you delivering? It's not just spending money. So I will use 10K to create stickers and put them on lampposts throughout the cities. I don't think that would be an appropriate way. But if you say, I will do this and this action, or even create stickers throughout the city if you want, but my disbursements are related to the amount of new people coming in through that initiative, then it would be a good proposal. So those are the things that we need to describe when a marketing proposal would be appropriate. So in round one, for instance, there was one team that made a proposal to have an AI house or something, they called it. I think it was somewhere in California, have a house of people where people could meet and learn and teach about AI. And you can look at that proposal from very different angles. But let's suppose that these people are really genuine in their way to create a community around AI. Well, it might work, but in such a situation, we will really need to have quantifiable goals. So when is this a success? Not by renting a house and inviting people. That would not be a success. It would need to have some measurable outcome based on which we could measure the success. But I'm also, I don't want to make it too tight, that pool. I want to allow people to surprise me with things that I didn't think about at first. And maybe there's a really out of the box way of maybe you can make TikTok movies. I don't know. Actually, it could be a very good idea. But then come up with a metric that we can measure on when we think it's a success. So people coming from TikTok to a certain landing page could be a metric, for instance, if we can measure that properly. Peter had to go. Okay. So yeah, that is so that's a good point on marketing. So marketing would also be a lower end category in terms of awards. I wouldn't like to spend. So there was also a risk at the first round. What if 80% of the proposals would be marketing? Would we be happy then? And how would we go about that? So I think we mitigate that by having that in a separate pool. But on the other hand, I would really, really love if non-AI developer community members would find some way to become engaged with the platform and with deep funding and find ways to help support and grow our platform. So if you have any specific ideas, Tivo, let them.
Yeah, the reason why I asked this was just to get the understanding of scope for who are listening, and I'm thinking about like from Kateri's perspective, there is a lot of people who found that helping other proposals is much easier task to actually to start off. Like making a project is a bit more complicated, but seeing a comrade doing, oh, that's a great idea, how can I help you? Oh, you need slide text. Oh yeah, I can draw, I have some Photoshop. And like having services which just help other people who are using either the Deep Fund platform. And then I just wanted to be clear, like, okay, how much is Ambassador program or SingularityNET in general, like related to that, just to make sure that somebody who is and has an AI mindset and wants to market the AI, but is not really scoped on the platform itself. Is that the valid thing?
Yeah, as long as it supports the growth of the platform. So if you manage to attract, so I can imagine that you would create an educational website or blog or whatever around the platform, which is not directly immediately related to the platform. Actually, and this is a very clear example of overlap between Ambassador program and this deep funding thing. I can imagine that if you say, I will create a blog and I will write 10 articles on the 10 most interesting services that are currently on the platform, or I'll make a video about it or whatever. That could be, I mean, that's already kind of quantifiable. If you say, I will write 10 articles, and maybe we should put some metric there that it will at least have a certain amount of views, for instance, or likes or whatever. But that could be very valuable for the platform, yeah. And something we're missing and that we don't get around to in our day-to-day business. There are many things like that we would like to do, but we simply have to make choices. We are already doing a lot with the amount of people that we have. I can also, if I would have the time, if I would be a community member right now, what I would do, actually, I made a proposal like that 2 years back when I was a community member, is to make a kind of animated infographic that explains, maybe not necessarily to developers that want to onboard a system, but to the general public, what the platform is, what it is today, what we can expect in the next 1 or 2 years, and how it will eventually turn out to be, and what the place of AI DSL and OpenCog Hyperon is on the platform. That could also be really useful material, so that would also be applicable. I think the best thing for me would be if somebody, a community member, would say, I will have this and this initiative, which will bring 100 developers to the platform. That would be my dream marketing initiative. So maybe somebody who's well known in a community, or maybe somebody who wants to go through GitHub and filter out interesting services and then have a one-on-one relationship with these people and try to motivate them to come on board. Actually, that's an overlap with the existing services. It could, yeah.
We might need to consider offering referral code options, because right now, on the quantifying things side of life, how do we know where somebody comes from?
Yeah. I have thought about that also some time ago, and how we can make that work, a good referral scheme. Usually, somebody who goes to the platform, or to any site for that matter, in marketing, isn't doing that because of one trigger. Usually people get 5 or 10 triggers and then they make a move. And the question would be, which one is the determining trigger there? So suppose that somebody would already have visited our website 5 times. Let's make an extreme situation. Would have had 3 proposals in, would have joined all these meetings, and then I would give him my code. Would I then get awarded for referring that person? So there are a lot of tricky things.
The way Catalyst does it, it just adds.
Sorry?
In the project Catalyst, each proposal has a section who referred you, and when the proposal gets funded, then so you already get the information, regardless if it gets funded or not, and you already get some insight. But then if it gets funded, then the person gets contacted, and if there is no overlap that they actually already know each other, they're working on the same proposal, and no conflict of interest are there, then if the referee is added to the reward pool, then the reward pool is split between all the referrers in that funding round.
Yeah. So that I thought about a similar mechanism for the existing services, but then I would expect most of the time the submitter would be the one, and then it would be actually reversed, where the submitter would mention the developer. But what I wonder, how in Catalyst, how do they determine that somebody is not part of the team, because you don't know who's part of the team?
Well, you have to put an email address there. And I guess the only check is based on IP addresses, and based on email address, you will see what other proposals, if any, you are part of, or are you even a part of ITScale. And if you're not, then...
Yeah, so it's a very low threshold thing, and it can easily be gamed if you want. And maybe it's also not a big problem if it would get gamed that way. Actually, I thought about a similar thing, a similar mechanism concerning ideation. So in an ideal world, I would see that a lot of people would bring on ideas for deep funding services or for services on the platform. And then if a developer or a developing team would adopt such an idea, they could reference the person who created the idea in the first place, which wouldn't diminish their own returns, but it would give some extra to the person that put the idea forward. But I was thinking about the same thing. So if I were a proposer, I would probably put my own name there. And it's a hassle to try and filter that out some way. But it's still something on my mind. But maybe this whole ideation pool is a different way of attacking the same problem. So if I'm not a developer, but I have a good idea, I could submit it to the ideation pool. And then by the visibility of that pool might help me to attract a development team around that idea, and then bring it to the next stage, and then not be involved in the next stage of it. But it's interesting. Yeah. All right. One thing that we didn't discuss today yet, which was on the agenda, is the conditions on which we would launch round 2. Since we're now only left with 3 people, including me, I think we should skip that for now and maybe come back to that next time.
Next meeting is Wednesday, 13 November? Like skipping next week, or
23? No, I think right now, for now, we're doing it on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
And
I
last
was just
time
wondering because people are coming
agreed
back
to
from
do it on a
summit.
weekly basis, but most of them aren't here right now, but that's for different reasons. So I would suggest to have the next call a week from now, so the 23rd.
Okay, we can, yeah. Depends who will be back. But again, I know that half of them do get the airplane ticket back on 22nd. So perhaps they already.
Okay. Yeah, and then the question is, if they're just back from the summit, how much appetite do they have on jumping on a call at this time of day?
Exactly. Like one of the person is coming to join back me, so, and don't know when is he gonna stay here for a day, and if he's, yeah, all of that. Yeah, just to consider, like, people are now traveling and that may cause exhaustion.
Yeah. On the other hand, if we do it in 2 weeks, then potentially a date for a new round is really close. And
What does it?
theoretically, we could already have started a new round by then. So yeah, I think I'll keep the next date open. And if there's just a few people, then there's just a few people, and then we'll have a discussion with a few people, like actually also today. And my experience is that conversations with a few people sometimes are also, it's not always the amount of people that determine how valuable a conversation is.
Today was also a lesson learned also on the Peter when he was in the session where he was mentioning that the one in the meeting you also want to capture who are the people, what made it success. So when you look at a good process, you always notice the failures, not the successes. And when you notice successes, you don't usually know what caused the success. Is the person, was the model, was the facilitation, what was that? So if you have less people, you have better insight what made it a great session.
Yeah, well, determining what your part in a success or a failure is really hard. I think many people have a good understanding what their own contribution to a success is, and a much different understanding of what their contribution to a failure is, and mirror that to the outside world. But that's a whole different psychological topic. I would suggest for now that we just end this part of the meeting. We'll keep open a spot for next week. I'll try to proceed with describing the conditions for the different pools, and maybe some concrete things will come out of that. There is a disclaimer there. There's a lot of other stuff going on, as always. That's the same disclaimer I can give always. So it's always a bit tricky how much time I will actually have to complete that. But having said that, that will be. So I think the goal next week could be similar. The agenda could actually be similar to the one that we had today, but maybe zooming in on some specific areas. All right, if you agree, then I will stop recording. So everybody should be watching this. Thanks for watching. I hope it brought you some inspiration. If you have ideas, if you have suggestions, feel free to bring them forward. Even if you don't want to join a meeting like this, you can still put forward your ideas and suggestions on our social media channels. So feel absolutely free to do that. And thanks for being here, and thanks for watching.
It means Discord, if you don't know what.
Discord, and we also have Telegram. So we have a specific group in Telegram dedicated to deep funding. But Discord is even better, is preferred environment. But also I will answer everything on Telegram as well if you prefer that channel. Thanks for that, Tivo. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. And hopefully be seeing you next week.